Hello, this is a quick tutorial on how to use this website and the methodology behind creating these phrases. There's 4 different steps you want to follow when creating the phrases. And so the first step you want to do is we're going to start by searching for a word and select the correct sense. And so for the example I'm going to do tank. I'm referring to the vehicle. And so when I type in tank, what you get is you get a bunch of different senses here, which is our results, showing the different meanings behind tank. And so if you look at the semantic field and the definition, you want to choose the one that we're looking for, which is an enclosed armored military vehicle right here. So I'm going to click that, and that's going to bring me to the next page where I'm allowed to type in a phrase for this sense set. And so before I do that, there's 2 more steps you want to follow. The next step is to look at the hypernym, is to select a hypernym. So that's step 2. You want to select the hypernym of tank. Now, instead of trying to think of that on your own, down here you'll see this thing called English Word Net. You want to click that, and that's going to bring you to a different site compiled by a university, I think it was Princeton, and they have done a fantastic job of organizing the English language into this hierarchy. And so down here, you have the option to choose an inherited hypernym. So just by clicking that, it's taking all the guesswork out of figuring out what the hypernym is for every word that you want. And so right here you can see a tank is a military vehicle, is a vehicle, and so on and so forth. And so when I say select a hypernym, what I mean is I want you to select a hypernym as far up the structure as you can, but that makes sense. So a tank, that makes sense, is a military vehicle, which is a direct hypernym, which is a vehicle, but I don't really consider it any more of these. Even though a tank might actually be considered a artifact, I mean, we don't really think of it as an artifact as far as the human brain. So right here, I'm going to, I see that it's military vehicle. So that's my base point that I want to start with. And so you can click in these links and it will take you to other places. But now that I've seen that you have military vehicle, that's a hypernym. You can always select the hypernym. And military is an adjective in this case. So I'm going to choose that. So if I go back to my site now, uh, the third step now, after we've chosen our hypernym, is to look at the definition. And so here you have an enclosed armored vehicle, has a cannon, and moves on caterpillar treads. So here you can see, in this case, the definition did have the hypernym. It's not always going to do that. And what we're looking for in the definition are other verbs and adjectives that we can add to the phrase in order to make it more unique, in order to optimize it. And so right here you see that armored is an adjective right there. And so we can use that. But cannon and caterpillar treads, while they're related to tanks, they're like part of the tank, you probably want to stay away from that if you can help it. Now sometimes you can't help it, like for the case I did scissors and a thing that cuts paper, and I use another noun, but that noun I would consider to be a very high frequently used word. So if it's a very high frequency word, you could probably, a noun, you could probably use it. So before I move on to my final step and typing in the phrase, I also like to go to this other link that says English definition, and that takes you to the Google page where Google has done a fantastic job of creating these definitions. And what I mean by that is that they have sometimes explicitly said key cultural information, like for example the fox. Like if you look at define fox, what you'll see is it says a proverbial for its cunning. That kind of cultural knowledge is what I'm talking about. Anyway, going back to tank, what we can see is a heavily armored fighting vehicle carrying guns and moving on a contiguous articulated metal track. Anyway, fighting right here is another word we can probably add. So by using these tools, we're coming up with the best possible phrase. And now I'm ready to type it in. So I would type in armored fighting military vehicle. And now that phrase is automatically saved. You don't have to press any other buttons. You don't have to click enter. It's just automatically saved. And so one of the things I would point out here is like now I can move on to my next word. I can go back to search and search for another word. But I want to show you the rest of the features down here is that the word order does matter in English, that you'll notice. So for example, the word banana, it has the phrase long yellow fruit. And so what you say it that way and not yellow long fruit because that sounds more natural to say it long yellow fruit. There's that knowledge of English that you need to know in order to make the phrase sound much more natural. And so that while I know word order I hear is not as big of a factor in Japanese, you still need a high level of knowledge, I believe, in Japanese, or you need to be able to consult a Japanese person in order to try to create these Japanese phrases. So unless you have that knowledge, I would try to stay away from inserting the Japanese phrase. And so right here you have a sentence set, which should be equivalent to here. Again, WordNet already did these matching up. I just pulled the data onto the site that WordNet had already done. Here's a definition. But I talked to my Japanese friend, and he told me to type in, soko sen toyo no norimono, which means armored battle vehicle. And now you'll notice that these are not exactly the same translations. They don't have to be, okay? They can be different. There's different ways to, it could sound in a different language, but right now they don't have to be the same, okay? And so now there's a Japanese word net, and this is how, again, this is where it's got the same definition, and here's the sensets. So I don't really like using this that much because you can't see that hierarchy. It's got the same structure as the English word net because this information was ported from the English word net onto here. So I just did the mashing up manually. But the only thing I like about this is you can search in Japanese. You can't do that with my site. You can't do that with the English word net. But that's the only time I would use that. And finally down here you have comments. So if you want to post a comment, you simply type in your name, and then you type in your comment like translations are not the same. Okay, and then you hit submit. And so now you can do that for any phrase that you make. And so this is how you go about creating these phrases. Now, it's not going to always be that easy, okay? It's going to be difficult sometimes. And so when I get to those mental blocks, what I like to do is I like to go to the English word net, and there's these other things you can click, and you can just explore, the word net, but there's the sister terms. And like we said back in my paper is that sister terms are terms that share the same hypernym, in this case, military vehicle. And so by comparing them, this can help you figure out not only is the phrase kind of optimized, but also it helps you with those mental blocks. By comparing each of these terms, you can try and figure out a way to make a better phrase. And so by using the definition, by using WordNet, we can make the best possible phrases. And so instead of trying to think of these phrases up on the top of your head, try using use WordNet, look at the definition, and then finally make the phrase. So there's those two steps, and from there you can make a whole lot better phrases. I hope you enjoyed this video.